The Shit, a podcast that tells the unfiltered tales of filmmakers' craziest production and on-set experiences.
Because every shit situation on set makes a great story after. I'm Taylor, a director and editor.
And I'm Kristen, also a director and editor. And today we have our guest, Sean Williams, who is going to tell us about his shit show stories on set as well. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing all right. Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no worries.
Sean, I understand that you are an AD. That's what you predominantly do on set?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As we've spoken to a few other ADs, it is a very interesting job that you have.
Largely you're keeping the clock. I mean, it's problem solving, but it's also making sure you make your day and that things don't run behind schedule. So when things go sideways, you're usually the first person to know about it. And if you're not, then you're probably not a very good AD.
Cut and dry.
I feel like everyone's had a metaphor for being an AD so far. Do you have a metaphor that you like to use? If you don't, that's fine.
I really don't. That's put me on the spot on that one. No, I don't have a metaphor for it. I am a person who likes to figure out the problems or the puzzles, and so I like to look 3 or 4 steps ahead. Being on set's a chess game, I suppose, and you kind of have to look. So like when you're in a scene, I remember once on set, an actress was talking to me and I have my ear plug in and I'm talking to her and she's asking me questions about what's happening in the next couple of days. But at the same time, I'm hearing 4 conversations from 4 different departments in my ear and would be like, oh, 1 second, the finger goes up and you respond. And she's like, how many people are you talking to right now? And I said 6. I'm talking to 6 people right now. And so it's kind of like that. As a kid, I always grew up, and not intentionally, but I could hear the conversations you go to a restaurant and you could hear, you knew what the conversations were around you. I've always been like that. And it's not intentional. I'm not trying to eavesdrop, but on set, it's basically professional eavesdropping because you need to know where the makeup department is. You need to know where lighting and grip and what's next on the schedule. If you need a jib built for, 2 scenes later, they better have it built. And so if there's a problem, it needs to be addressed. If they try to build the jib and it's missing a pin because the rental house didn't give it to them, somebody needs to be going to get that way before it's supposed to be put up. So those are just things you look for. It's just knowing that you have the gear ready, knowing that you have the prep days. If an actress hits the makeup chair, how long is she going to be there? When's she going to be out? Things like that. It's just, it's part of the gig. And it's part of the gig that I like. It's, my producing friend says that she's an artistic enabler, and it's a little bit of that as well. She's better at it than I am, but that's what you're doing is you're trying to enable the film to be successful.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely.
And you're also kind of a shield for the director as well. They need to be focused on what's happening, and so you need to make sure everything's happening for them.
Yeah, 100%. As you said, you're enabling the creative and just kind of like softening the blows of everything else and making sure that the chess pieces are in the right places for success, for sure. We've also often heard about how ADs kind of have to operate as therapists sometimes, there's
occasionally. Yeah, if you have to recover somebody, you can. And I'm good at that. I used to work for Disneyland actually. And so guest recovery was like a big part of the Disneyland training when I was in college. And so I can recover somebody if I need to, but I don't know that I want to sit and talk about childhood traumas.
Yeah. No, not so much about that. I think it was more in the sense of you have people who have to collaborate, and sometimes that doesn't always happen. And it kind of unfortunately falls on the AD to kind of be the person.
Split vision is a real hard thing.
100%.
When the vision splits, when the actor sees it a different way than the director, and that is having a hard time being articulated and told to get everybody on the same page. It's a difficult thing. And some directors are more camera based, some are more performance based. And so, kind of getting that vibe, working with a director multiple times is really beneficial. But if you're first time working with a director and you're not sure how they direct and how they get there, you kind of have to be the bridge for that in some cases. Because if they speak technical and your actor's wanting the emotion, you kind of have to help fill that in a little bit. A good set usually is when the director, for me anyways, is when the director is on the emotional side and the DP is handling the technical side. And then that's a good marriage because they understand each other, they get a relationship going, and then they can handle their departments appropriately. So, but that's good. I did hear a note from the office. The guy in the office named BJ Novak said that he likes it when a director gives emotional notes to camera. So instead of saying like, "I want you to do a zoom in," tell them the emotional reason for why he wants to zoom in or pan over or whatever the camera movement is. And I liked that note. I wrote it down. So I like that as well. So yeah, it's just finding the language, and it's finding a common language that works for everybody that's in the room.
I love that story kind of stuck with you, that mode of communication, that line.
Yeah, I take notes a lot.
One thing that kind of stuck with me when we chatted briefly earlier was your first story. I wanted to segue into that. You mentioned something about pig guts.
Pig
so do you want
guts.
to tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I worked on I was not an AD on this when I was a PA. Honestly, by the end of it, I was a camera operator. So it was one of those, right? Yeah, I have a personal mentor, and he was the DP. And then when they went to do reshoots, they couldn't afford him. And so they asked me to fill in his spot. So I asked permission from him, and he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And by the end of that, so this actress is a pig monster who has an axe, as all pig monsters do, right? You've got this kind of like rock star looking, long-haired, pig-faced beast that is one of the villains of this particular horror film. And he has his victim put out on a butcher block. And so they have this contraption where half of her body goes into the block so you can't actually see it. And then they're using fake legs and things along those lines. And somewhere around midday, I learned that they were going to be using actual pig guts and cow intestines. And she didn't know. She did not know, which was an interesting choice by the production. And I'm just the camera dude at this point, and so not an AD. As an AD, I would probably have stepped in and had some conversations and permissions. But as a camera guy, I was just like, oh, that sounds like a bad call. Where are the pig guts? Where are we keeping the pig guts? I haven't seen them on set. Oh, they're on an ice chest outside. It's 92 degrees outside. What are we doing? Oh, I'm sure they're fine. We put some ice in with it. It'll be okay. It was the most rank smelly meat substance I've ever seen. And this girl is of course topless on this butcher block. And I told her about 15 minutes before it was happening, I said, do you have any allergies to meat? Or are you a vegetarian? Is there anything that we should know? And she's like, no, why? I'm like, well, because they're using actual guts on you. She's like, no, they're not. We'd become friends at this point. And no, they're not. She thought for sure that it was a prank and that I was giving her, that's part of the problem with doing pranks on set, is because sometimes they don't believe you. But yeah, it was actual guts. So they splayed them out, and the guy's got an actual butcher knife, and he's chopping up guts in the scene. And they're screwing from her chest and like all over her chest, and they had been sitting in the sun for the earlier part of the day, 8 hours of the day. It was a lot. It was a lot of a day. It was against a green screen. Butcher blocked this big pig monster, and she's squealing and screaming and trying not to vomit. And the rest of the crew has their shirts up over their noses, and it was an interesting choice.
What was the point of having them be real? Were they thinking like her screams would just be all the more genuine?
Honestly, I think it was probably budgetary, right? Like you could probably just go to the butcher and get pig guts pretty easily without having to try to make fake ones. I don't know what, I mean, God. This is the same film that like needed somebody to spin around. And so they just like put a person on a spinning block and then like would spin them. There was a lot of cut corners. There was a lot of weird things on that movie. I don't think it ever saw the light of day, actually. I don't think it made it out of the post, but
so that poor actress laid with pig guts on her really for nothing, because it never.
I think she's got some demo footage, but I doubt that she put that in there. Yeah, it was a fun set. It was a good one. Lots of screaming, lots of blood. You'd go home every day and there'd be blood on something of yours. And you're like, I wasn't even near that kill scene. Why am I splattered? But it would happen. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. how did she react after the fact? Like, it sounded like she complied with the scene, but like, did
So
she
the
kind of?
director of this movie had worked with Charlie Band a lot. I don't know if you know who that is, but he does like those like super super low budget like films. If the film is successful, they'll do a sequel, and then that sequel will get a smaller budget. I don't know how they do it.
Huh.
Um, they make tons of movies constantly, horror films, and they just churn them out, churn them out. This director had worked with Charlie Band for a long time and has been used to these. He did movies about like killer clowns and psycho circuses and things along those lines. Killer Bong, I think, at one point. So this actress was one of the Charlie Band actresses who had been on a lot of these like really, really low budget films where she's, you know, so she was kind of used to like the lack of care when it takes, you know, the actors and the long days. You know, those sets will go 14 hours easy. And so it was my first experience with that low of a budget. That was like with that high of expectation. So they're trying to shoot for the moon, but doing it with percentages of pennies on the dollar. And it was interesting. So she took it in stride. She did what she needed to do to get out of the day and make it happen. So she was a champ. But man, I don't know. And then, you know, your skin's stained, and it's not from fake blood this time. It's from actual blood. It's a different feeling.
Oh God,
I wouldn't
yeah.
recommend it. Like if you're on a film set and they're like, "Hey, should we use fake blood or real blood?" I would go with fake if you get the option. Don't do that. And
Really?
refrigerate your pig guts if you're going to use them. You
I was
know,
gonna say, I
get a
think
little
that's
dry
the
ice.
most
Do something. Yeah.
That's definitely the most important thing.
Maybe
out of,
don't,
out of
you
this
know,
story that we
give them 2 hours in the trunk of a car and then be like, "Oh, that could be bad," and then leave them outside the rest of the day. Mhm.
Great
Jeez,
tips
yeah.
for any future animal intestine usage.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
I would avoid it altogether.
You
The
know, just
smell
just
smell
talk to
did
your
not
actress,
leave my
maybe.
sinuses for a few days. It was bad.
Wow, gosh, yeah, I can
Mhm.
imagine. Well, in that same vein of, you know, maybe not being prepared for things, I feel like you also brought up another story where something similar did happen in kind of a separate situation, but you mentioned some stunt work that had to deal with an air ramp.
Yeah. So on this one, there's this position in film that they call it a key PA. It doesn't exist. It's basically we don't want to pay for a second, which is an assistant to the AD. So instead, they just have like somebody who seems somewhat responsible, who's a PA that slowly starts taking on responsibility and doesn't get paid more, but yet is responsible for the other production assistants. It's a good way to get into being an AD, so you kind of take it. There's a lot of work in the film industry that's like, "Hey, you're doing more, but you're getting paid less. That's cool, right?" And you go, "Yeah, thanks for the opportunity." But so this was one of those cases where I had 4 PAs underneath me, I think, and the stunt choreographer was also the AD, and he came over to me and he's like, "Hey, I need 2 hours. I need 2 hours of uninterrupted time. The second I'll take set, and I'm going to work with the actor, this kid from Nickelodeon. His name was Caleb Thomas, a good actor, but you know, I think he's 45 now, and he still looks like he's 17, that kind of thing, you know." And he's not that old, but he said, "We're going to work with an air ram, and he needs 2 hours of rehearsal. We're going to put down mats. An air ram is basically a device where they pump air into it, and it's like a V shape, and it pops up, so it sends somebody flying through the air. You see them on film sets all the time whenever they're doing stunts. It's a great way to, without doing wire work, to send somebody flying." And he's like, he needs practice on it. I said, "Okay, cool." So I let him know, "Hey, 2 hours is up." He's like, "Right. Well, we haven't made our day. Hour and a half is going to be great." "No, well, he's young, he's agile, he'll be fine. We're going to do an hour and a half." "All right, cool. I'll let you know in an hour and a half." 30 minutes goes by. I let him know. "Oh, yeah, we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. We're going to, an hour, he'll get it in an hour." And I'm like, you sure? This seems like, no, it'll be fine." Long story, somewhat shorter. The first time he ever went off the ARM was on camera. So he never even seen the device turned on. He never had any practice with it whatsoever. There were no stunt rehearsals. There was no stunt man. It was literally 2 stunt guys, one of which was also the AD. And we're in a living room. So we're in a house. And it's kind of like one of those old kind of had a 70s feel. So it had like a metal ironwork railing to separate like the hallway from the living room, where there's like this brown shag carpet and stuff. And there's to make it even more fun, there's a puppet team. So there's this massive like monster puppet thing. It's got 6 dudes inside just sweating and trying to work this massive puppet. And the puppet is supposed to backhand the kid. The kid launches off the air ram and is going to fly through the living room and hit the wall. The wall has been reinforced, so it's like a breakaway wall. He's supposed to dent the wall, and he's going to fall into a breakaway table and hit the ground. And I'm like, wow, that's ambitious. That's a lot of components, and they're going to get it in one. And I mean, I'm sure they're going to go in and do some close-ups, right? No problem, they're going to do that. But at this point, this is the master shot. We're going to do it. So the kid's on the thing. Are
you guys all nervous at this point?
Oh,
or are you...
well, I think I may have been one of the few that knew there were no rehearsals. Like, I don't even know that the director knew that he didn't have a chance to try this.
Okay.
The AD was just flying by the seat of his pants, like, it'll be fine. It'll be good. It'll be great. He's young. This is a kid that prior had fallen out of his own trailer. So I was pretty positive it was not going to go properly. And so they, 1, 2, 3 action. The backhand goes, the puppet smacks the kid. They push the button, the air ram goes off. And he just absorbed the entire air ram into his knees. Like, he didn't lock up, so he basically didn't get any of the boost. And he went about 2 feet, landed on the iron railing, and just kind of splayed off of it and went sideways. And I was like, oh, like this audible, like, oh my gosh. And he was fine. He wasn't in good humor about it, but he was fine. And okay, they're like, well, reset it and go again. He's like, no, we're not. I'm not doing that again. That's not happening. I'm not doing it. So to fix the problem, they did 2 things, and one of them was completely ridiculous. But so then they move cameras. They get a close up first of the backhand. That's great. And then they go over to the wall and they get a close up of the wall, and the stunt guy, who was this big cowboy looking dude, and the AD just threw the kid into the wall to crack the wall and have him fall through the table. So they just picked him up and kind of threw him. And so he hit the wall. And then days and days later, I'm watching the second AD get put in this harness system. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we need the in-between from the backhand to the wall, and we're going to green screen it. Okay. And so they're putting the second AD in this harness because they're getting ready for it. The actor's off doing somewhere, and she was about the same weight. So they were this is the only person on set that was about the same weight as this kid. So they're putting her in a harness, and they're like, oh, it's going to be great. And I looked over at the other PAs, and I was like, guys, just so you know, this will never be used. There's times on set when you just look at it and you go, oh, they're not going to use this bit. There's no chance. And so they get the actor on there, and they haul him up into the rafters of this set, and he's like flailing in front of a green screen like he's flying through the wall. And in my head, I cannot picture from A to C to D because they're skipping parts. And sure enough, when I saw the movie, they didn't use the green screen footage at all. It was like 4 or 5 hours of our day of him up there like, and it didn't get used. So they used a quick cut, and he gets launched, and then he hits the wall, and it looks fine. It's great. But in between those things is a kid hitting a metal railing, sputtering off, and then smacking against a shag carpet, and then 4 hours in a rig going up against a green screen, all for 10 seconds of camera time. So,
and your instinct, you just knew that wasn't going to be used.
You just know, and there's times like as an AD you can speak up, but like when you're smaller on the food chain, you kind of there's a definite command chain on a film set that you don't want to override. So you kind of just go like, okay. And again, we talked before cameras were rolling that I take notes on stuff, right? And so I took a note, and I was like, okay, make sure don't waste your camera time. Don't do things like this. And if he was going to do it, make your day first, because they were adding this onto the day. So like they missed parts of their scheduled day to film this green screen bit that they just tacked onto it. On that same film set, the first time, the reason I got promoted is I promoted with no money, just more responsibility, right? I was
promotion. You gotta love
right.
this.
The second day on set, was my first day. So they had all done a day and they decided they needed another person. And so a friend of mine said, hey, can you help us out? And I had already started doing some AD work. I'm like, sure, I'll do a PA day. That's fine, whatever. And I ended up being on the movies for the whole thing. But I was like, I'll come out and do a day. And so I get there and there's these, young kids fresh from film school and they're the other PAs and I'm kind of an older dude. And they're like, oh, we've got this. You can work base camp. And this particular location had us up on a hill and you took a golf cart down to like where the honey wagon, which is, the restrooms and the star wagons and stuff like that were. And make up chairs and all that. So I would just drive the actors up and down in a golf cart. It was great. It was the most cush job ever. But literally 15 minutes in, I get the call and it comes over the, hey, Sean, can you come up? You're a grip now. I'm like, I'm a what now? I've done some lighting, but okay, I'm doing that. And so we get up there, and the reason being is that it was a Halloween movie, and they wanted a picture of, they needed to shoot a shot that was at dark, and we're talking it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and they need an exterior shot where it looks like it's nighttime on Halloween. And so this was not scheduled correctly. This is an AD mistake, in my opinion. And so they need to build a tent out of anything they can to try to block off, God, daylight in front of this house on a B budget might be mean. It probably had a little bit more than a B budget, but it was a lot. So we're putting up, a bunch of duvetine, which is this black cloth, and 4x4 flops, and doing anything we can to block out the sun. And we worked for 2 hours, and they shot 10 seconds of this kid taking a photo in front of the house with his dad, because his dad leaves. Now, me taking a note, right, as an AD in my life now, we were there past dark. Everyone that was there past dark. There was no reason to do that morning because we put it at the end of the day, but it was because the schedule was there, and the AD at the time was so rooted in his schedule that he couldn't see moving something. And so that's the problem. You have to have a plan and then throw that plan away in some ways. And so he gets there and he sees, oh, this is a night shot. We need to make it night. And yet it was well past dark when we were packing up trucks, and it took 10 seconds. So we literally could have lit that at night very quickly and very easily and shot that 10-second scene at night. But instead it took 2.5 hours to build a tent, stealing like parts from craft services in order to have framework. Like it was ridiculous. Easy ups with duvetine all over them, and then 4x4 flops, and just clamping every little possible light gap for a scene that again is in the movie for seconds. The more important of that is a still photograph that they took on that. So that still photograph is in it more than the actual footage. But you could have photoshopped that, and you can also shoot day for night. Like there's ways around it, but they didn't see it, so we built a tent.
Wow.
And I was going to say that a lot of this come from the hierarchy that exists, and you were kind of beneath people who really wanted to stick to their approach and their way of doing things, and you just kind of have to, even though you see that this isn't going to work out, just kind of
in film. You see a lot of people that don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to be wrong. I don't love being wrong either, but I will take it very quickly. You know what I mean? Like if there's a better approach, it's fine. The chain of command is important because you just can't have everyone jumping over to the director and trying to talk about it. So like I mentioned, being a shield, that's part of it. But as an AD, I feel like I'm fairly approachable, and I will hear input from a lot of people. Sometimes it's really bad, and you're like, okay, thank you. I'm glad that's what you did in film school, but it doesn't work in practicality, so we're not going to do that. But I really appreciate you, and if you have any other thoughts, please bring them to me. But think a little longer before you do. And that's the whole approach. But a lot of people get rooted in what the right choices are, and that I thought about this for weeks, and I made this schedule and it took us months to do it. Okay. Well, I mean, when things go bad, you have to start moving. You have to, when you're looking at a day and you're like, hey, we have this location and this is the only day we have this location, and you're already 2 hours behind. What are you cutting? You go to the director, what are you cutting? What don't you want to get today? And then they start getting nervous, and then they start working a little faster because you're like, look, I don't want to be the hard nose, but you've done 22 takes on this line. I think you nailed it on part 2. I know you're not seeing it the way you want to see it, but you need to soon, because otherwise, what do you want to lose to the day to get this? And is this more important than that action scene later, or the kid going on the air ramp, right? Like, you need to have those. So that's part of that puzzle that you're, as an AD, you're trying to figure out. And so when you're not an AD and when you're looking to be that in the future, it's great to watch other people make mistakes, because mistakes, man, the best learning lessons are other people's mistakes, because you didn't have to go through the pain of making the mistake yourself and learning from it. So if you can learn from others and watch them flail, that's the best thing for your career, because you can, I mean, it's great if you can help them. It's not like just leave them out there to die. But if you don't have the power or the ability to do anything to save that moment, you learning from it for yourself is really a powerful thing.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, and I think being on set is a great place to do that. I mean, how much chaos is happening around you for you to absorb and be like, oh, I'm not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many.
And talking about that. Oh, sorry. Continue, Kristen. I cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, talking about sort of those making mistakes. You had mentioned before an incident where you kind of took the fall for something else that happened. There was something that happened in a cave.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Happened with an actress.
Okay, so to set that up a little bit, I have a mentor, and he was working. He's this guy. Any film that you've watched as a kid that had a spaceship in it, whether it be the Enterprise or the Millennium Falcon, he worked on it. He filmed those ships, right? So he did practical effects camera operator. The guy's got a massive career, from Flight of the Navigator to Willow to Lord of the Rings. He's done all these movies. And now as practical effects are dying off, he started taking other types of work and doing different things. So on this particular film, he was the project manager. So probably more qualified as a camera operator than anybody that was actually operating cameras on the film. But he decided he wanted to organize this project and make it happen. So he was the project manager on it. And he calls me up and he's like, hey, can you do one day for me? I really need an extra set of hands, and I don't know anybody else right now that can do it. And I'm like, sure, what do you need? And he's like, can you work for the art department? I'm like, well, I've been this man's AD on things. I'm confused, but I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll do a day in art department. I'm an artsy guy. I come from an artsy family. And so I get there, and they're building this set, and it's a company called Illusion Industries, which is owned by Todd Tucker. He's a special effects makeup artist. And if you look at him, massive career as well. And it's his second directing film. And he worked on like Passion of the Christ. He worked on Mrs. Doubtfire. He did Gargamel for Smurfs. His career goes way, way back, right? He's worked with Mel Gibson a lot. So they have this studio space, and they've built this set, and I'm looking around, I'm like, wow, this is really kind of impressive. They've built this raised attic, and it's completely dressed, and there's like a forest off to the side. That's really cool. And I'm like walking around, like, what are we doing? We're soundproofing. Like, we're what now? And like, yeah, we're near an airport, so we have these massive, thick, heavy cloths, and we're going to take mason bits and drill them into the walls and hang them. And this is like massive day labor, like construction work, not art department at all. And I'm like, I'm going to kill my friend. My mentor is now dead. This is hard work. And so I'm up on this massive ladder, and I'm drilling these bits in and hanging this massive cloth. And as I'm doing so, I'm move the ladder, I get down, I do a little piece, move the ladder, do a little piece, move the ladder. And I'm starting to come around the corner, and I realize it had just gotten completely quiet. And it's because everyone else went to lunch and just left me on a ladder continuing to work, and didn't realize that they left me behind. And I'm like, oh, so I'm just kind of bitter and sweating more than a fat guy should sweat. And I'm just like, this is improper. I'm so mad at everyone. And I'm doing it. And all of a sudden I just feel eyes on me to my right. So I look to my right and almost completely fall off my ladder, because at eye level on this 18-foot ladder is Jesus Christ on the cross, crucified. Very lifelike and realistic, because this man worked on Passion of the Christ. And so he has literally Christ on a cross, who is now making eye contact with me. And it was very startling, because Jesus snuck up on me and I didn't see it coming. And so this was the precursor to this film. And I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I mentioned it later, and they're like, oh, do you want us to plug it in? Because it breathes. I'm like, no, I'm good without seeing him breathe. Yeah, it was before he'd given in. So Christ was there with us on that set, and it kind of overlooked the rest of it. I don't know how I missed it when I was like touring the property, but as I'm hanging this horrible soundproof clothing, there's Jesus Christ on the cross. It was startling. So then he calls me up and he's like, how'd your day go? And I'm like, I'm going to murder you. You owe me a lot. And he's like, do you want to come on for the rest of the shoot? And I'm like, no, not even a little. And he's like, no, not with our department. Like, we need somebody in the production department and you would be a PA. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll PA for you, Dave. That'll be fine, whatever. And so the AD is a guy named Cowboy, and everything that you think of. I pulled my earplug out once, and the little rubber tip was in my ear. And he's like, I got you. And he came at me with a knife and popped it out of my ear with a knife. Like, this is Cowboy. And
oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's startling. And
Did he have a harmonica too?
No, but no, he's everything you think of when you think of an AD named Cowboy. Like, it just, it's just absolutely that. Like, if you go to his Facebook, it's him on a horse shooting backwards because anyways. And one of the big things is there's kind of this like nightmare aspect to this film. And this girl is afraid of spiders, the character, and she falls from the attic through like a hole and ends up in a spider cave with these massive spiders. And we had not seen the cave. It's this massive construction and towards the back of the studio. And it's basically a bunch of like 2x4s, but then they built inside of it. So it's like got this apparatus built around it, and there's a couple entry points. And I know because we're filming, one, we've fogged up the entire studio. So the entire studio is like thick with fog. You can barely see 3 feet in front of you. Part of our job was to patrol the perimeter because we had to have a fire lane, in this building. And so you had to walk that. So I knew that area very well, but I had not been inside the spider cave. I knew that we put a lot of particles in it. So there was a lot of dirt and like atmosphere, and they pumped it into the spider cave. And if it was coming out that much to make the rest of the building fogged up, it was dense inside that structure. Inside there, you have a animatronic puppety spider where they like had a drill and they pull the drill and then its legs would go, and then they'd make it move towards the actress, right? And they had light up LED effects and different things. Great thing. And then they had 2 camera crews that were built into this cave. So they were in one of the openings or off to the side, and they had a third crew that was shooting from the outside in like an opening, like a porthole that they shot through. And so the girl gets in there and they call action, and she gets overwhelmed. So there's dust and dirt, and she's kicking it all up, and she has an asthma attack. And so it comes across the comms. Now, again, thick as pea soup, can't see anything. And across comms, Cowboy calls for, he says, get her out, she's having an asthma attack, get her out. And all the PAs are like, what? We're not search and rescue. We don't even know where the entrance of this cave thing is. And so we kind of stand there, and I got physically shoved by Cowboy. Like, Cowboy moved me to the side, and he bursts in to the cave, and he comes out like he is a cover of a romance novel with this actress who's kind of like just wanted somebody to show her where the door was, but instead she's been scooped up by a man that she doesn't know that well. And he's got her with his cowboy hat on and his, khaki shirt and the whole thing, looking a little Indiana Jones-esque. And he's got her in his arms, and she's coughing. And the smoke clears, and there he is standing her, and then his long hair is coming down. And you're like, oh, okay. And then he sets her down, and he like attends to her a second, and then across the comms, open channel for everyone to hear, he says, all 4 PAs are fired. You guys are done. I want a team that reacts. I want new PAs by the end of lunch. Get out of here. And the other PAs were not even sure. Oh, so mad, so angry that we didn't play romance novel ourselves and didn't jump in to save her. If I had gone in, I would have
asking of the glory of his like big moment. Like he seemed.
Yeah, well, like one, I would have stepped on the spider and ruined the animatronic, or I would have tripped over a camera crew. I had no idea what was in there, right? So there's no reason for us to jump into that situation, in any regard. And there's an EMT on set somewhere too, so like none of that was for us. So I'm like, okay, no problem. And I took the other PAs, and I'm like, let's go. And so I went into my mentor's office, and I was like, hey, so we just got fired. He's like, what? And he thinks it's a prank. And I'm like, no. We're all fired. All 5 of us. And so we're gone. See you guys later. And he's like, no. Wait. Just stay. Stop. Just sit down for a minute. And so we sit, and he's like, I'm going to bring you guys lunch. because we're breaking for lunch, and I'll bring you guys some crafty, and you guys sit here, and I'm going to talk to. So him and the producer are talking, and they're like, "How do you fire PAs? Like, what do they even do?" And so then the producer who wants to show how with us he is comes over, and he's like, "Okay, this is what we're going to do. You guys are still obviously he can't fire you. One, we can't replace you. Two, you're irreplaceable, and like this is one of the productions where like because it's low budget, it's built off the back of the PAs in a lot of ways. You know, like those guys are doing more than they should be." And
100%, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, like honestly, most valuable player can be a PA on a set. Like those guys can break their backs, and learn a ton. PA position is a really good starting point. But anyways, so they go, no, you can sit here for a second, and then he's like, okay, here's what's gonna happen after lunch. He's gonna do a public apology, and I'm like, no, he's not gonna do a public apology, and he's like, no, he's gonna do a public apology. We're gonna all have a meeting, and he's gonna address the entire crew and cast and apologize for belittling you guys on open channel, and I'm like, no, how about we just go back to work and get in the pocket? Like, why don't we just do that? Why don't we just move forward like it didn't happen? And that's fine.
I don't see Cowboy wanting to do the public apology.
He would have made him. This guy would have made him, but I did not want it to happen because it would have just been like, hey, I know this was an awkward scenario. Let's make it more so. Like, let's see if we can just make it as awkward as possible. Embarrass Cowboy further, because I'm sure he had a little bit of a rage situation and probably already had instant regret anyway. So, like, you know, it's fine. So they go and tell him, like, hey, you're not firing the PAs. They're still with you guys. And he's like, fine. Now, fast forward to, like, the next day on set. We were breaking for the weekend. And Cowboy pulls his PAs aside and starts physically crying and says, you guys are the best crew I've ever had. I can't wait to see you on Monday. And we're like,
this guy's the ultimate drama queen.
He yeah, I don't know what was happening with. I mean, honestly, like a nice dude. I still talk to him occasionally, but like, he was going through it on that one. I don't know what was happening, but yeah. But if you ever need an earbud taken out of your ear with a pocket knife, that dude's got a blade for you. I don't know. He was an interesting character. There's a lot of characters on film sets.
He sounds like quite the character for sure.
But if you need somebody to charge headfirst into a spider cave, I'm not your guy.
I mean, and rightfully so, especially as a key PA. Like, what the hell are you
right,
doing?
as a key, like as an imaginary character.
You're going to trip over other people. Imaginary character, that too.
Right, yeah.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I think some people, you know, secretly wish they were in front of the camera when they were only working behind it. And maybe Cowboy is one of those people.
I mean, I could see that. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It sounded like his like moment of glory rushing out, you know.
Oh, I'm sure he wishes people had cameras on him. I'm sure he wishes there was photographic evidence of that moment.
I wish there was photographic evidence of this.
I do too. I do too. They should start wearing like a spy eyeglasses just to record.
Just a GoPro like attached to
just a GoPro on my chest. Yeah, be obvious about it. Yeah, the police camera. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you do so, you know, you'll come back on and you'll have some footage for us. So.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be
we'll cut it in right here.
Yeah. Whole different show.
That was awesome. I loved all those little pearls of wisdom that we can leave our viewers with, and definitely some things to chew on walking away. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about, you know, where people can find you online, anything you're working on right now that we can follow?
So we have a little fledgling podcast as well. My little company. I have a company called Wait For Me Media. Is named after my dad that passed a few years back. My dad was the smallest kid in his group of family members, and so he'd always say, "Wait for me," like because the kids would run off without him. And so after he passed, I renamed the company after him. And
like you on the ladder, you got left.
What was that?
Like you on the ladder.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then but to that end, we have a podcast. So my mentor that I mentioned briefly, his name is Dave Hardberger. And nobody knows who he is, but you know every movie he's worked on, right? So like from Wrath of Khan to, you know, Return of the Jedi to Willow to Return of the King to all of these amazing movies, but you don't know who he is. And so we have a podcast called Below the Line, and we talk to creatives and filmmakers that have worked on amazing things, or maybe just getting started but have an interesting viewpoint. And we talk to them about the industry and their careers. So we have a few interviews already out. Dave's just dropped. We were kind of taking a pause in solidarity with the strikes currently. But we've got a stunt woman who was Trinity in The Matrix. Her name is Danielle Bergio, and we have an interview with her. And she's amazing career. She did stunts. She started as a dancer and did stunts. So it's just talking about like those shared experiences, similar to you guys. But it's about careers that people maybe don't know, and yet films have a visceral effect on my life. I'm structured as a person for some of the movies that I saw as a child, and things affected me in certain ways. So like you can kind of go back and chart my character by the movies that my brother, who's 10 years older than me, exposed me to as a child. And those were really important things. And then later in life, I end up working with a guy who's worked on those films. I sat in a movie theater watching a movie and realized it was a remake of Wrath of Khan. And I was in the theater with the guy that worked on Wrath of Khan. That was a moment that like, it just clicked. Like no one in this theater knows that this guy filmed the Enterprise and the original Wrath of Khan. He was there for that moment. And yet here we are in Into the Darkness or whatever they renamed it. And it's, and nobody knows that he's sitting here, you know, way too close because we went on opening night. We're too close to the theater, but yet here he is. And nobody knows that. So that's kind of what the Below the Line is about. There's 6 episodes. There's like 5 more in the can that we're going to release soon. And, but it's fun. It's just an hour and a half conversation, talking about film industry and what they've worked on. I don't host it. I just produce it. I have a host that comes out, and then we do a lot of TikToks and Instagrams and little tiny bits. We also did a panel at Los Angeles Comic Con last year, and we've been invited to so again this year. So yeah, so it's fun. It's my side hustle, fun project that's a hobby until it's not.
Well, we can't wait to check it out. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your stories. It's been so much fun.
Thanks for having me, guys. Nice meeting you both.
Well, that's it for Shoot the Shit. Thanks for joining us.
Join us for the next shit show.
Subscribe here for the full version of this episode.
And remember, if it gets tough on set, it will make for a great story.
No Longer Network.